Have you ever had a glitch in the Matrix? If so, consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Sometime in 2020, I think around March, before the UK lockdown, me and my cousin were playing Tekken 7 on my Xbox. Out of nowhere, the game crashes and goes back to the Xbox home, so I thought, oh, must have just been a little malfunction. I click the icon to start playing again, and a message that says enter a disc to play this game pops up. I knew from there that the disc must have gotten stuck, so I was gutted, but not too much as I only play the Xbox when my cousin is around, and also, I have the game on PC. The whole of 2020 goes by, and I didn't/couldn't get my Xbox fixed due to COVID, and I wasn't too fussed on it as, again, I didn't really play it. One of my sisters and I tried to get the disc out manually. There was a manual eject button you could press with something thin, so we used a paperclip. That didn't work, and we accidentally lost the paperclip inside the Xbox. Then, we even opened the Xbox up trying to see if we could access the reader to get the disc out, but we needed specific screwdrivers for that. So, no luck there. We eventually gave up and my sister checked the game case just in case, but there was no game in it. Around April of 2021, I decided it was time to get the Xbox fixed as my older sister was getting married in a couple of months' time, and so she was over frequently, and family would be over soon to help with preparations, etc. And so, it might be used to play. I took it to my local electronic experts, and I told them the problem. Disc stuck inside. They said no problem, it'll be £20. However, if the reader happens to break while they're taking the disc out, it will cost more. The usual. I say fine and I leave it to them. I then receive a text that same day from them saying that it's ready to be collected and will only cost the £20. So I remember that I was happy that there was no damage done. I got to the shop and they proceeded to tell me that there was no disc in the drive. I was utterly confused. My immediate thoughts were that they were scamming me, and that they took my disc. They're a trusted company, so I was a bit disoriented by this, or that they didn't really check. So I asked if they put another disc in it, and they said yes, and that it worked completely fine. They also found the paperclip that me and my sister lost, and then returned it to me in a small Ziploc bag. I then said thank you, and paid and left, still confused, and then I even phoned my sister, who couldn't answer as she was in a meeting, so I texted her everything, to which she then phoned me soon after. I tell her that they didn't find a disc, and that I think they may have taken the disc, still believing this outrageous hypothesis that I made up. I go home, and just to make sure that I'm not going crazy, I check the Tekken 7 case. And what do you know? The game is there. I remember telling my sister this over the text, and she phoned again also confused, stating that she checked the game case on the night that we opened the Xbox up just to make sure I wasn't being silly. But it really wasn't there. I still don't know what happened. I asked both my mom and dad, even though they never touched the Xbox, if they had maybe seen the disc and put it back in, and they both denied it. I then thought maybe a guest or an extended family member came over and saw it and put it back, but then I remember that it was during lockdown, so no one would have been at our house anyways. This really sucked, as it meant I could have used the Xbox for the past year but didn't. But you couldn't blame me, as I was 100% sure that there was a disc stuck inside. I genuinely would have betted my life on the fact that there was a disc inside. I've got several far-fetched explanations, but They're all a reach, and I genuinely believe that I and my family, or my Xbox, entered a parallel universe or something, or experienced memory loss from carbon monoxide poisoning, as these explanations do not make sense. Explanation 1, most realistic, me and my cousin were actually playing on my PC. This doesn't make sense, however, as I and him specifically remember playing on the Xbox. We also almost always play on the Xbox when he's here anyways, as it's much easier than getting my laptop out, plugging in the HDMI, etc. And also, I remember the message about entering a disc coming up. An explanation 2, which is very far-fetched. After a while, out of autopilot, I maybe saw the disc ejected and put it back in its case, but then forgot. This obviously doesn't make sense. I would have remembered something like this, even if it was autopilot, due to the seriousness of the situation, my Xbox potentially being broken. Also, I remember my sister opening the game case and seeing no game in there. She also opened all the other game cases just in case. I'm not here for an explanation, although if you have one, I would love to hear it. I'm just here to share my story, as I recently heard of this subreddit due to a podcaster mentioning reading stories off here. So, I guess I'm gonna start from the time that I went to the hospital in 2015. Apparently, I had high blood pressure and it was dissecting my aorta. I was rushed into surgery to save my life. I was out for 2 weeks, but within that time I had what I called nightmares. It was 2 straight weeks of complete terror. Sometimes I experienced myself in my everyday life, but each vision, dream, or nightmare always ended in the very hospital that I was in. Sometimes I woke, and I'm in the morgue, surrounded by bodies, while I was yelling to get attention and nobody could hear me. Other times I was in a completely different life, but I was still me. One, I was a rich entrepreneur nightclub owner, and I'm not the nightclub type. Other times I was a soldier in Iraq separated from my platoon. I was captured and tortured and forced to denounce America. Another dream, I was trapped in a strange restaurant that I owned and ran. Anyway, let me digress. When I finally came to, I just wanted to see my wife. The nurse said that she was coming and should be there any minute. My wife did end up coming, and when I saw her, I knew it was her, but she looked different. Her weight had changed, and so did her voice. Our memories were mostly on par with slight differences. I just wrote it off as a perception of events, and carried on waiting to be released so I could go home and finally feel safe. So, as I was discharged, and sent home with a huge amount of medication and new life rules to live by, they wheeled me down to my wife's car, but only it wasn't the car that I remembered. She owned a Hyundai Tucson, but this new car was a Chevy Equinox. I only knew it was her because I could see her get out to help me in the car. I asked her when she got the new car, and she said that she hadn't. We get home, and she helps me out and into the house. At this point, everything else looked normal. Same furniture, same color walls. So I began to brush things off again, figuring I would eventually circle back to what I had noticed. I asked where the dogs were, and she said that she had put them out so they won't jump on me because of my chest incision. So she got me upstairs and put me in bed and turned on the TV, and that's when I started to notice more strange things. And this stuff cannot be a perception problem. I turned on the TV to watch some news, and saw that Donald Trump was running for president. I thought, that's strange, because I remember he had dropped out of the race because the Republicans wouldn't back him, but they seemed to be embracing him. I thought maybe he had decided to just get back in. I was trying really hard to just brush things off now. I started to get anxiety really bad, so I turned off the news and picked one of my favorite movies to watch, The Lord of the Rings. As I was relaxing and getting my mind right, my wife made me something to eat and asked if I was ready or willing to see the dogs. I couldn't wait to see Rue and Riley. She opened the bedroom door and called them. They come running up in the bedroom, but instead of being happy to see me, they just stopped, sat and stared at me. There was no welcome home like usual. They acted like I had been there the whole time. Shortly after this, I learned about the Mandela effect. I can tell you that this is not all the Mandela effects that I do remember, but some that I do. I don't know what any of this means, but that's my story. Yesterday, my boyfriend and I were enjoying the beautiful day, and we decided to take up a walk up to the local Cumberland Farms to grab some iced coffees. Nothing out of the ordinary. That was until on the walk back home. I want to explain the layout of the area briefly, so you can kind of understand. So, there's our street, and at the end there's a blinking light, and then a pretty big corner on the left side, if you're coming out of our street. And then you're on a pretty busy main road where the Cumberland Farm is. As we were walking back down the main road and rounding the corner to get onto our street, a white Mercedes-Benz car came flying behind us, around that corner. I get it. The person was probably looking at a car ahead, etc., and it's kind of a blind corner and cars do come around it fairly fast. What's crazy is that we didn't even hear it. Something inside of me just said to turn around, and as I did, the person, who was a woman with dark hair and a red shirt on, was swerving to avoid us. My boyfriend and I both saw the car, and we both saw the woman that was driving it. It was almost as if time had slowed down for just that brief moment. I said, "Holy crap, that car almost hit us." His reply was, "Yeah, that white Benz?" We brushed it off. We kept walking, talking, didn't really think much of it. We were about 800 yards from our house when a woman with dark hair and a red shirt on was bringing in her garbage cans. You can tell she was most likely just getting back from work, still had her work badge on, and this was around 6 p.m. We live in a pretty small, friendly little community. The side her house is on is directly on the lake. We say hello, and she says, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you guys back there. I didn't even see you." We said that it was okay and that it's definitely a blind spot, and we all laughed it off, and the boyfriend and I kept walking towards our home. Now, this is the weird part. The houses that are on the lakeside have literally the smallest driveways, basically non-existent, and pretty much no lawn either, so no garage. Nowhere for a car to be pulled around, and nothing. This particular home, the woman's home with the red shirt, honestly gives off more of a summer cabin kind of home, if that makes any sense at all. Anyways, there were two cars in the little parking area of her home, a bright red, and I mean apple red, and an ugly green one, more on the dark side. Both are colors that you don't really see. I'm not sure on the exact type of car that they were, but they were both the same, besides the color. Ugly cars that I want to add. Definitely nowhere near what a Benz looks like. Not even close. More like what a Prius looks like. My boyfriend was the one that made the comment and said, "I thought it was a white Mercedes that almost hit us." I was so dumbfounded. I kept looking back, trying to justify what just happened. It was 1,000% the same woman, but a totally different car? I mean, these cars' body shapes were so beyond different that there's no way we could have possibly mixed it up. Not to mention the color. A bright apple red and a Mercedes white? I woke up this morning still trying to rationalize this mix-up, and no matter how logical I try to be, I just can't. So this happened about 4 years ago, but me and my boyfriend, now fiancé, remember this exactly the same and still have no explanation. We had just moved into our first house, and for an idea of the layout, when you walk through the front door, the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one room, and you have a visible view of the sliding glass door that goes to the back porch when you walk in the front. On the outside, if you walk through the carport, there's a screen door that also enters the back porch. It was a pretty small house, so walking from the car to the front door takes like 10 seconds tops. For context, soon after we moved in, we rescued a dog, Athena, a 9-month-old Shar-Pei. We had only had her for a couple of days at this point, and she was not house-trained. She would run if she got the chance to get through the door. And there were times where I spent hours chasing her down the neighborhood when she would slip through my legs. She was also very skittish and didn't like interaction at the time because of her former situation. The only way to lock our sliding glass door was to jam a PVC pipe on the tracks so it couldn't be opened from the outside. The screen door on the porch was also locked, and the screen was higher up, and the bottom part was blocks. Okay, now to the nitty-gritty. We needed to get groceries for our new house, and couldn't leave the dog inside because of the fact that she wasn't house-trained yet. She would go everywhere and rip everything apart. It had happened once already. It was a cool night, and the back porch had a fan, so we put her on the back porch with her food, waterbed, and the fan going, and we went to the grocery store a few blocks away. When we got home, we walked in with the groceries, left the front door open, and had to make several trips to and from the car. Each time, we walked out together and walked in together, and each time she was sitting there looking at us through the window or playfully jumping at the door. Each time I would stop and playfully jump back towards the window. Well, the very last bit of groceries we were bringing in through the front door, we both stopped dead in our tracks. She was inside, walking from the sliding glass door. It looked as if she just walked right through it. We both looked at each other confused. We were never out of each other's sight, so neither of us could have let her in without the other seeing it. The PVC was still jammed in the door, and it was tightly shut still. We went to the screen door, and it was still locked. We checked for any holes or opening in the screen and the back porch, but there were none. Thinking back, even if she would have gotten out from the back porch somehow, she would have just run away. We checked and pondered any possibility, but it just didn't make any sense. We still have her to this day. She's 5 years old and is the best good girl ever. She's house-trained, no longer skittish, and is very happy and healthy. In December of 2017, we needed to get Christmas stockings for our first holiday living on our own as a new family of 3. Being that our son was also 1 year old just the week before Christmas, and we had a trip planned to see the family, the budget was tight. I decided to settle on some cheap throwaway stockings made of felt that I figured we would just use to get us through this first holiday, and if they didn't hold up, or I wanted something else going forward, no big deal. My husband's stocking had a felt Santa on it, with a glued-on snowflake embellishment on the toe of the sock. It was the last stocking of its design that wasn't messed up in some way or other, then hanging a bit shorter than the others. I was glad to have found it because it was also the last way I could find a matching set of 3 all in the same style. Our son had a reindeer with a scarf embellishment. Mine had a snowman with a hat embellishment. Around 2 weeks into having them, my husband notices just one of the spokes on the snowflake embellishment is missing. Thinking our son messed with it and probably got it folded back or tucked behind itself somehow, I got up to investigate. Not only was it not just creased down, I really got in there trying to be sure, to the point that I was worried I would undo the hot glue holding the entire snowflake on. It was snipped. It was a clean cut straight across like a pair of scissors. Furthermore, I found the now cut off spoke on the floor beneath where the stocking hung. We talked about how it was weird that it seemed trimmed off, and that it's a bummer because, even for being cheap, they made quite the cute trio. I threw the dismembered piece away because it was honestly just not even worth saving. It wasn't a big enough deal to me. A week and a half or so goes by when my husband is again the whistleblower. This time, he's telling me the spoke is back, and asking me when I got a new stocking. Confused, I go to grab the stocking and show him closer, since clearly his eyes needed some help. I'm walking over to pick it up while telling him that I didn't get a new stocking, so he's obviously mistaken and just seeing things. Sure as hell, it's there. I tug on the piece that we both saw on the floor, and both saw me throw away. It's solid, like it never was detached. There's no evidence whatsoever that it was repaired, even though that wouldn't have been possible either. My husband didn't replace it either to mess with me. It was the same short, off-kilter hang that it always had, and was unique to that specific one in comparison to even the others at the store. An error in processing that made it obvious that it was the stocking. We still have the questionable Santa stocking, and it has had its complete snowflake ever since its mysterious return. Major event? Maybe not. But the fact that it was experienced by 2 other people at the same time, during both instances, makes it interesting, at the very least. So, it was 2008 or 2009. I can't remember exactly. It was around the time that the USA was phasing out antenna TVs, and there was that huge push to get the digital converter boxes. I'm sure a lot of you remember this. So, like many people, my family only had cable in the living room, and all of our other TVs, including the one in my bedroom, needed the converter boxes. The converter boxes finally come in, and I am tasked with hooking them up in my room, my parents' room, and my sister's room. I get them all hooked up, and all is well the first day. The next day, I noticed that periodically my TV would get a large black box that would appear perfectly centered in my TV and would take up about 60 to 70% of the screen, and all anyone could see was the outer border. And this would happen multiple times daily, and only ever to my TV and my converter box. My parents didn't want to go through the hassle of replacing it, so I just had to deal with it. Fine. Months go by, and my best friend would come over to hang out all the time. We would play games and watch TV daily. So he has also seen the strange box that appeared on my TV multiple times. Then the news is on, and I remember it was some interview with Reverend Al Sharpton. I don't recall exactly what it was about, but my friend and I both disagreed, and were just acting obnoxiously and talking general crap about Al Sharpton, whatever he was harping on about. It was immediately after that the black box takes over the screen, except this time, in white letters and all caps inside that box, it reads, "Shut up," with at least 8 exclamation points. We were both stunned and just immediately stared in silence at the screen. It wasn't subtitles. It wasn't closed captioning. It wasn't an hallucination. Someone somehow inserted those letters on my screen at the exact moment on purpose. Who it was, or what the purpose is, I've never known. And it's driven me crazy thinking about it all these years. The message stayed on the screen for at least 2 full minutes, and then just disappeared. And this was the catalyst for both of us to start our journey through all things strange and conspiracy related, and I've never read anything similar happening to anyone else. We tore apart the converter box later that night, looking for any kind of transmitter device or microphone, but we couldn't find anything of the sort. Of course, we had no experience with those things and were teenagers, so it's entirely possible something was there that we just missed. I put the box back together and plugged it back in, just waiting and hoping for another message to appear, or something that would come from it, but it never did. Neither of us have ever forgotten about it, though, and we both wish we could know how it happened and why. Okay. I've been reading this subreddit for years, and for some reason it just occurred to me that a glitch totally happened to me when I was around 18 years old, and it totally freaked me out at the time. I'm 23 now. I'd been hanging out at my friend's house and left to go home pretty late at night, 12 a.m., 1 a.m. I lived in a smallish suburb at the time, so at this time of night there was really nobody out driving. I got to the main road right outside my actual neighborhood, and was a few turns away from the street that I needed to turn on. I'd lived there for years at this point, so I was very familiar with this road and everything around. Next thing I knew, a huge deer jumped out from what seemed like nowhere. Like, it went from nothing at all in the road to the deer pretty much being right in front of my car. I remember thinking, holy crap, there's nothing I can do, I'm about to crash. I also remember thinking that the deer was almost literally running into my car, like not trying to run across the road, but like right into me. Then, I just remember this scream that came from, like, the depths of my being, that I imagine only comes out of you when you know you're about to die or be seriously hurt. I went to slam the brakes, but, like I said, the deer was already at my car, and I braced myself, and then all of a sudden the deer was just not there. I looked in all directions, and there was no deer anywhere. I was driving on a 4-lane road, and there were only buildings and parking lots on the other side of the road, so I would have definitely seen the deer if it somehow managed to jump out of the way. I couldn't understand what just happened, or why I couldn't see the deer anywhere, and I was actually thinking, is the deer stuck under my car, or like on top of it? I know that doesn't make sense, but I just couldn't process there being no deer. I picked up my phone and called my friend Alex, whose house I was just at, freaking out and telling him the story as I was pulling into my driveway, and telling him that I was scared to get out of the car, because I was still half afraid the deer, or part of the deer, was on my car. But when I finally got out, my car was totally fine, and there was no sign of any accident there. I didn't know a lot about timeline jumps and glitches back then, but now I feel like maybe that's exactly what happened. So that was this week's collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. I know this one's slightly shorter than they have been lately, and I'm sorry for that. That kind of falls into the lack of stories. I believe I've had some submitted. Problem is, I set these up structurally about a week in advance, so if you guys did submit a story to me, it'll probably be on next week's video, just so you know, if I haven't used it yet. And it's a glitch story, just yeah. So, hopefully you all enjoyed the collection regardless, and if you did, please do hit that thumbs up button, and subscribe to the channel if you're new and liked what you heard. You can also do other stuff. like leave me a sentence. Sorry. Leave me a sentence with the word of the week. Last week's word of the week was knowledge. There we go. And several people submitted their sentences, as always, on the screen right now in a few seconds prior are all of the submissions from both YouTube and Odyssey. Thank you both. Thank you both. Thank you to both sides. Thank you to everyone who submitted. I want you to know I really do appreciate you. Thank you. You guys are amazing. You keep this going. And yeah. Today, the word of the week. Not really today then, huh? This week. This week, the word of the week is one that's a little more lucky. You've probably assumed right now. It's luck. L-U-C-K. The chance happening of fortunate or adverse events, fortune, good fortune or prosperity, success, one's personal fate or lot. Obviously, we'll also accept lucky, unlucky, etc., etc. Any split out of the word luck. So, derivative from, whatever. My brain's not functioning quite well today. I'm tired. Whatever. Anyways, no more whatevers. Whatever. Anyway. I'll talk to y'all later. I'm just messing around at this point. I will see you guys in the next video. But of course, until then, my friends, sleep well.